Hey everybody, welcome to the MangaReloaded podcast. It's Blake and Matt, and today, as was just mentioned, we are going to be discussing dads in manga and anime, and more specifically, why there aren't any. And I know that's might come off as odd to say, but if you really sit there and think about it, especially in the action/fantasy genre, there aren't really a lot of dads there, and the ones that are there suck.
Every single dad has either left their kid in pursuit of some greater venture, whether it be noble or not, or they're dead, or some combination of those two things.
Or they left on adventure and died.
Or they literally suck.
Yeah, or they're just awful. Now, I don't know if I want to start with the exceptions right off the bat. Now, I'll start with the only two exceptions that really come to my mind, just because that's not really the point of this video. And that is Ichigo's dad from Bleach, which I know he's definitely not Dad of the Year award. He's very he likes to play the idiot, which we learn later in the series is just an act, but he likes to play the idiot, and he also definitely favors his two daughters over Ichigo, and that comes up a lot. But he's there. He's a single dad, and he supports his entire family with his pharmacy business. So maybe he's not a pharmacist, small doctor, something like that, medical business.
I forget what his first name is again.
Ishin, okay.
Yeah. I have a hard time hating Ishin necessarily as a character. Now, he is the catalyst around one of my least favorite plot points in Bleach, or twist, or whatever.
Which one is that? There's quite a lot to choose from.
The resolution of the Grand Fisher story is not good.
Fair enough.
And that's how his facade is revealed to be just that.
Yeah.
However, Ishin comes out looking like one of the better ones when we take a closer look at the other ones.
And
I mean, you can make the argument that there are definitely better ones like Minato, but again, he would go into the dead category.
Yep. And bouncing right off of that, the other example I had as a passable dad is Naruto to Boruto.
Yeah.
And again, he's still not the best dad in the world. He ends up dying though, doesn't he? Or does he? I'm not really familiar with the Boruto story enough.
From what I've heard, yes, but I don't think that's been like confirmed. The way I understand it and had it told to me from a friend, we get a fast forward in like one of the Boruto movies, or maybe in the manga too at some point. I don't know. Basically, we get a fast forward, and it seems like Naruto and Sasuke are nowhere around anymore. But we don't know how that has happened yet. So it's like, yeah, he dies eventually, but
so it's not really relevant.
Is it like confirmed, or is that just a cold open, right?
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, Naruto's a half decent dad. I mean, he just creates a clone that actually plays dad while he's off, being the head of a nation.
Yeah, I mean, he's busy. I can't fault him for that.
And I will admit I think it's also a funny contrast to see how much of a spoiled brat Boruto likes to act like. Daddy never notices me. I'm just gonna be a brat and just deface the mountain of Kage just so Daddy notices me. And then you have the flip of that with Naruto, where it's like, I didn't have parents. My dad was a teacher. Referring to Iruka.
Yeah, Naruto as a series definitely subscribes very heavily to nature instead of nurture, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because pretty much every single kid ends up being kind of a copy of their parents to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, getting the those are the only two exceptions I can think of off the top of my head. Um, I I guess a lesser one because he doesn't really matter to the plot, but if I recall correctly, because it's been a while, in Death Note, Light's dad is there for him too, and like
Uh,
offers to give up his life at the end for him.
Light, I wish I remembered his dad's name, but his dad is a champ. He's probably like one of the best dads we've got in Shonen Jump
Yeah.
that actively takes a part in the plot.
Mm-hmm.
And Light definitely doesn't deserve him.
No, absolutely not. But yeah, so that's to a lesser note another good dad. But I think that summarizes most of the passable dads. So
Yeah.
then getting on to what the real meat of the episode is, the deadbeat dads. Where do you want to start with this one? I mean, I know there are two specific ones you really want to talk about. Do you want to save those for later? Or do we want to just open with that?
Shoot, I only remember one of the ones I really specifically want to talk about. I mean, I've got
FMA,
stuff to say about most of them.
FMA and Hunter x Hunter.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to compare them, right?
Yep.
Because, look, Jing is a complete scumbag. I don't care what happens later in the Dark Continent arc. I don't think anything is ever going to change my opinion on Jing. He could be like Mother Teresa, or like Mother Teresa is said to have been like.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't care at this point. All right. I'll go ahead, Blake.
Well, no, I was gonna say Jing is terrible dad. Just a. I mean, not even just as a dad. He's just an awful character too. Like he's a douche to everyone. But like, then when you factor in, it's like he's also a parent, though that's not very apparent because he's so bad at it. Like, Kite is a better dad, like by 1,000 times. And
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I also feel like that's another reoccurring theme that we're going to see a lot in these is that you have really good father figures, but the actual biological dad is garbage.
Yeah, there's always a good surrogate dad or a better surrogate dad. Hell, in Gon's case, I'd argue Leorio would be a better dad. Leorio should just adopt Gon. Yeah, I know they're only 6 years apart. I don't care.
I don't care. I'm sure he'd take it. It's okay.
I felt the real love when Gon had been revived by magical wish and ran down the stairs and Leorio runs up. Like I felt that, bro. And then like Gon meets his real dad and it's like, hey
kid,
come meet me at the top of a tree, I guess. Okay, like there's a lot of emotions for Gon there, and it's just kind of really awkward for Jing. Which, to be fair, he should feel that way.
Oh, definitely.
After he on a televised event said, did he say he wants to see me?" When he found out his son was dead, pretty much. I mean, he wasn't dead. But he was just, I don't know.
On death's doorstep.
Mummified.
Yeah.
Comatose. Hanging on to life by a thread.
Well, he didn't say he wanted to see me, so I don't care.
Jing is a piece of shit because he takes no responsibility for anything he fucking does, right?
No.
It is directly Jing's fault that Gon ended up dealing with Chimera ants at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, first of all, Jing's like, did my son say he wanted to see me? When he damn well knows he did, because Jing left the fucking breadcrumbs for him to follow to get to Greed Island to go find him. And then when Gon figured out the trick to go find his dad circumnavigated that by having like them reprogram it
Well,
so
no,
that he
it
ended
was
up near Kite because he didn't want Gon to bring uh
that
his bestest buddy in the world, Killua, with him.
that's what it was. Jing said if he uses the card that makes him bring a friend or makes him bring the whole party with him, then he gets to go to Kite. If he uses the card that just brings him by himself, then he can come see me.
Yeah.
So
Jing
basically,
is
it's like
directly responsible for what happened to Gon.
and he takes no responsibility for it.
I literally hate Jing so much. I commissioned my girlfriend to make a shirt of the moment when Leorio punched him.
And that was such a satisfying moment, though, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's my favorite Hunter x Hunter moment because the whole time I'm reading Hunter x Hunter, there were two things I really wanted. I wanted Leorio to fucking do something important, and I wanted something bad to happen to Jing.
And voila, it happens at the same time.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
A similar deadbeat dad character with, I would argue, a similar reason, but a different approach is Van Hohenheim from Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
And
so,
in a case like that, again, it's a character, one of those cases where he went off to do something greater, essentially. At the time, because again, I'm a little foggy on Full Metal Alchemist. At the time that he left, he was already a homunculus. Well, he's not a homunculus. Whatever it is, he was already immortal, right?
Oh yeah, I mean he was before he had kids too.
Oh yeah, that happened like eons ago. And okay, so yeah, so he basically got done with regular life and decided he had to do more important stuff.
He left because for a multitude of reasons. One, father was on the rise and he could sense it. And he wanted, and as somebody who was responsible for what had happened, he was trying to take responsibility and do what he could, be that wandering the earth this way and that, to try and stop it. But there's also the factor. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's also the fact that he's not aging, and I don't think he wanted his wife and kids to notice that.
He didn't want to be the guy who completely outlives his family and never changes at all.
Yeah. And he knew that was a burden he was going to have to bear, so
he just left.
Yep.
But at the flip of that, you have, I don't remember, did he find out when their mother died, basically leaving them as orphans? Like, was he in story aware of that? I don't believe
he found out until after they did the human transmutation experiment.
Mm-hmm. So
I think he came back and, she had a grave, and then he had to learn about what had happened to his sons.
Mm-hmm.
Whether Hohenheim fails as a parent or not,
he at least cares.
Well, he at least left for noble reasons compared to Jing. Jing is all about, I know not to bring this back to Jing, however, Jing is all about his own self-aggrandizement. There was a video I watched defending Jing, and it basically went along the lines of, well, it's a cultural thing because in the what is the Buddhist sacred text again? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Well, in the story of Buddha, the first one, Siddhartha, he leaves his family behind, his kids included, basically to go reach enlightenment and bring back to society the path to alleviate pain
Mm-hmm.
and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
The way to get around suffering. And Jing is supposedly a metaphor for that because Jing has left his kids to go on a journey, but then the video kind of just falls apart because everything Jing does is self motivated and
Completely self-centered with no
yeah, it doesn't
regard for any
benefit
other
society
person.
in any way.
Right.
They put forth the idea that the father represents, I guess, the ultimate self. And just like the Buddha's kids would eventually go to try and become like Buddha, so too do these parents who leave represent the optimal self, what they would like to eventually become.
Mm-hmm.
And one could make the argument that Gon's goal is to be something like Jing. I don't agree with that interpretation, but someone could make the argument.
Right.
Um, that's definitely more valid in other cases like Maka, where we never even see her mom. But her mom represents, this is Soul Eater, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Her mom represents what she wants to become. That comparison would be more fair in that series. Although her dad sucks too.
Well, in the case, see, that was a funny one that I was gonna put forth in the case of Spirit or Death Scythe, whatever you want to call him. He is there. He is physically there for his daughter, but his daughter wants absolutely nothing to do with him because she blames him for everything, basically everything that is fucked up in her personal life. Or he cheated on her mom multiple times to the point where they ended up getting divorced, and I don't know if I don't even remember if we find out where or what happened to Maka's mother. All we know is that everything bad that has happened she blames on her father, despite the fact that Spirit literally tries the entire series to win Maka back over. The point is constantly made that he's an awful father. And every single time that he like brings up something sweet from their past, or like when she was a kid, I remember, oh, what was it? There was some event that was going on, and it was like Maka's like 10th birthday party or something like that.
Yeah.
And he brings up, he's like, yeah, I remember that birthday, and I remember the music playing as I was dancing with your mother. And she's like, no, you weren't. You were dancing with my 5th grade teacher. And he's like, oh shit, I hate your good memory. How to backpedal out of this. He's just, again, it's to a more funnier point. It's not
right.
It's not that he abandoned Maka, but he emotionally abandoned her mother, which then reflects on Maka's opinion of her father. So
Yeah.
he's still a deadbeat dad, no question about it, but he tries.
I mean, I think the reason that she has her dad and not her mom is because of like the idea I had put forth before. The idea that because kids naturally look up to the parental figure that is the same gender as them, or excuse me, the same sex as them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a natural phenomenon. So the idea that the father or the mother represents the ideal self definitely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just kind of funny that, okay, she has her dad has to suck. Like, why can't he just be a cool dad?
Well, I think what's interesting about that is that if you look at Spirit from a story or a plot standpoint, Spirit is a death scythe. So he is the ultimate embodiment of a perfect weapon. And he is also Death's personal weapon, the one that stays at the DWMA school. Basically, he's the death scythe of America, as I understand it. Maybe. Yeah. And so he is basically the most powerful weapon at the school. So from that standpoint, he's actually a very cool character. And like when you see him in fights later on in the series, he's always very cool, calm, and collected. But then whenever you put him in a situation where he has to deal with his daughter, he just completely falls apart, and it's fairly entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Soul Eater is a setting where normalcy would be anybody being normal would be incredibly unnormal. Nobody acts.
Like real people.
Nobody's all there completely stoic in that series.
Mhm.
There's some flaw. There's some major crippling flaw with literally every character.
Right. And if they are the perfect straight guy, then that in itself is their flaw, that they are the perfect straight guy. The way that the world works is over the top. So
Yeah.
naturally, Maka and her father.
It's easier to give her dad a pass, but it just seems like over and over again, dads are seen as extraneous,
mm-hmm.
or they're used. They're like the ideal that the main character has to reach.
Right.
Naruto's dad being the perfect example of that.
Right.
He's not only gone as if he, left, but he died. And he died being and obtaining what Naruto wants. Minato is the ideal version of Naruto. He's Naruto because he's got the Rasengan and all of the natural abilities Naruto will eventually develop during the war arc.
He's also the Hokage.
But he's also got a great personality, is incredibly intelligent.
He's the ultimate loving dad, because literally he gave his life to protect his son. Yeah. But at the same time he also died protecting the world. Essentially, he died for all the most noble reasons that you could possibly imagine. That is what he stood for. And
while yeah, that definitely serves its beat in the symbolic, I don't know, monomyth hero's journey or whatever, it sure makes him a pretty damn boring character, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, considering we don't even have it plainly stated to us that is Naruto's dad, even though every sign is pointing toward it, it's still a revelation for Naruto himself when he finds out.
Yeah, but I mean, he's just not a very interesting character, no, even after we meet him.
Even after we meet him, I mean, that's just, his embodiment is basically perfect character. He's the guy who does everything right, which is boring.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, that's not what we want either. We just want a good dad character in a battle shonen.
Okay. So then we have to bring up, I would argue, probably the most controversial dad, and that is Goku.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Vegeta.
Vegeta? No. I mean, close enough. I mean, you could probably put them right next to each other, but we reflect more on Goku's personal life than Vegeta's, so.
I mean, the series in general kind of accepts that Vegeta's a bad dad, and that's definitely the point.
Right.
So much so that I can't even fault the series. Like, it's not like an accident or something serendipitous.
He's a bad dad, apparently a pretty mediocre husband with an airheaded wife who's just doesn't care to see it. And yeah, so
I mean, Vegeta learning to be a better father and to be a better person in general is part of his character arc.
Right.
However, that's not part of Goku's character arc.
That is never something that Goku deals with ever. Considering it. Oh man, where to start? I mean, you just look at it as the fact that for most of at least one of his son's life, he was dead. For the majority of Goten's life, Goku did not realize that he even had a second son until he was revived, and Goten was 8, 9. Goten had lived a good chunk of his life not even knowing his dad, and then when we get back, it's like, oh hey, I had another son. All right, let's go do something more interesting.
I mean, Goku only has a day on Earth at that point, right? He has one day to do everything he needs to do at that point in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really fault Goku for dying all the time.
I mean, it's a busy job protecting the universe.
It is, but here's where I think Goku failed as a dad, and that's the Cell arc.
Oh, no question about it.
Um, First of all, people like to bring up the Saiyan pride thing, right? Like the idea that the Super Saiyan state, just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. I'm talking about the moment where he gives Cell a sensu bean, right? Pretty famous moment. He literally puts Gohan's life in more danger than is absolutely necessary to save the universe for the sake of bolstering Gohan's fighter pride.
Which
Because he makes the mistake of thinking that Gohan's mindset is exactly like his.
exactly.
Now, I understand that they had been in the Super Saiyan state for an extended period of time. However, they had also spent an abnormal amount of time together. I mean, think about this. They spent exactly 1 year in the room of spirited time.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to bed, they wake up, they see each other, they eat together, they train together, they bathe together. That's them every single day. In that 1 year, Goku probably spent more cumulative time with his kid than most parents probably actually get to spend in like 3 or 5 years.
Right.
Especially at that age, if you count for school and the kids want to be left alone and do their own thing. Because I forget how old he is, but he's old enough that, he could say, I want to play video games or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So Goku basically got to spend more cumulative time with his own son than most parents get to in a year, in 2 years, 3 years even.
Mm-hmm.
And he failed to realize that Gohan's personality is not exactly like his own. He needed Piccolo to fucking tell him that, yeah, he's not like you. He doesn't get a thrill from being put in lethal situations. He's a scared little boy right now.
Yeah. Piccolo takes the award for the best dad award. Especially when you actually sit there and analyze the series as what is Piccolo to Gohan? Goku's mortal enemy. And he literally takes Goku's son and basically teaches him everything he needs to know to be a man. To put it real flat like that. All of the necessary lessons, all of the caring and going through basically his adolescent life. Piccolo's the one who's there to show him everything and to actually, give a shit about him.
Yeah, Piccolo was there when he killed his first dinosaur.
Piccolo's there when he turned into a giant gorilla. And he even blew up the moon for him. God, the moon gets blown up a lot in that series. Poor moon.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, and as we develop later in the series, like when we hit Gohan's like teenage years, we really see he's not Goku. Gohan, I mean, even from the start of the series, it was put forth that pretty much Chi-Chi was raising Gohan to be Chi-Chi's ideal son, which was an intellectual. She wanted him to be someone who didn't have to fight constantly like Goku. And I feel like a lot of times that reflects in Gohan's personality because, again, we get the sense that he's a straight A student. He's someone who takes his education very seriously. And we also see whenever it's like Goku wants to go train with him, Chi-Chi's on his ass, and it's like, no, you need to do school. It's kind of the embodiment of that saying, make your living with your brain, not your back. Goku's definitely someone who makes his living with his back, breaking his back for the whole universe. Whereas Chi-Chi just wants Gohan to be a regular kid. And I feel like that reflects a lot in his personality, but Goku, being the awful dad that he is, not only doesn't get it, but it almost feels like he doesn't care to get it. And the flip of that, I can't even think of any good, if there are any father-son moments between Goku and Goten.
There are.
Are there?
I mean, it's pretty. Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty sweet when like Goten gets to hug his dad for the first time, and there's Goku working with him and Trunks to learn fusion.
Okay.
Right? 'Cause that's Goku's major interaction with. He interacts about equally, I'd say, with Goten and Gohan in the Buu saga.
Uh-huh.
But for the beginning of it, it's mostly him and Goten because he's trying to teach them how to do the fusion thing. I mean, it's definitely a stronger relationship between him and Gohan, just because they spent a year together in this room of spirit and time.
I mean, you can also reflect on the fact that it's one of those, like, looking at it from a real world standpoint, when you, like, the fact that Gohan's name is Gohan in itself would lead me to believe there's going to be an unintentional bias, because Gohan was Goku's grandpa, the person who raised him.
Yeah.
So it's expected there would at least be that unintentional bias regardless. But yeah, he's definitely the favorite.
Right. And if you want to consider, I mean, if we want to keep talking about fathers in Dragon Ball, I guess, Gohan isn't Goku's real dad, and he's dead at the beginning anyway.
I thought you were going to talk about Hercule for sure.
No, I mean, Hercule's great. Hercule's literally a flawless being. What are you talking about?
Flawless being, world's greatest dad, world's greatest fighter, savior of the planet at least 20 different times.
For sure. I mean, he is the one who tamed Majin Buu, right? The answer is puppies, and it's always been puppies.
Yeah, Hercule, world's greatest dad.
No, I wasn't gonna bring up Hercule. I was gonna. You could, I guess, bring up Bardock, but who cares?
No one cares. Goku doesn't care. No one cares. You were gonna bring up
Bardock. I'm just gonna say Bardock is a product of his society and leave it at that.
The only less notable dad I would say is King Vegeta, who we get to see.
Yeah, again, product of his society and upbringing, and honestly, I don't think more needs to be said.
What about King Cold? He's a good daddy.
Yeah,
he has his son. He has his androgynous son put back together. And then he dies. It's sticking with the theme of the deadbeat dads. Another one who definitely isn't as controversial, but is still definitely a deadbeat dad, is Yo's father in Shaman King, Mikisa Asakura, or Mickey for short is what I'm gonna call him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is his nickname, is Mickey at some points.
Yeah, his two surrogate kids that he's raising instead of his own son call him Mickey.
Yeah.
And again, I can't remember why he leaves. Why does he originally leave? Do we even know?
And where's Yo's mom? He too. She's not dead. She's just not around.
She's just not there.
I mean, he at least shows up in the story.
That is true.
Then again, I feel like Shaman King has a real issue when it comes to the parents and the greater shaman community at large within the setting. Like, if you're not participating in the tournament, what are you doing?
What are you doing? No one cares.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When it comes to Shaman King, I feel like there's almost, they never explicitly say it, but there just seems to be this thing when it comes to the Asakuras with the parents leaving their kids to be raised by someone else to learn their shaman skills. And then they also tend to adopt kids quite a bit. The Asakura family kind of adopted Anna, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
Yo's grandma who took care of her.
Mm-hmm.
And then his grandfather, after Yo left, or maybe before actually, there's Tamao.
Mm-hmm.
So them adopting kids is not a new practice at all. The thing you gotta wonder though is like Yo is so untalented with his shaman skills and so underprepared for the shaman fight that it's honestly baffling. Like he doesn't even know how to do an oversoul at the beginning of the story.
Right.
And yet that's like a ubiquitous skill that every other character seems to have known right from the get-go. The only ones who didn't know it were him and Sao Ren.
Yeah.
Although that's probably more of a product of Takei learning that he wanted to use that mechanic for the story
Right.
as it went on.
But as that reflects on the overall story, it just seems like negligence on the parents' behalf. I mean, Ren doesn't even have the excuse because he has his entire family.
Yeah.
So I would definitely chalk
And
that
his
up.
family pushes him as like the prodigy son. So
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would definitely just chalk that up to a change in writing. Um, but
actually, that think about Hunter x Hunter again. Would you say Killua's dad is a good dad? Silva?
no,
No.
no.
Okay.
Silva definitely. I mean, if not to Killua specifically, when you look at the way he interacts with the rest of the children, yeah, I'd say no. I mean, considering he keeps one locked away in a vault at all times, I would
Yeah.
I would definitely say Silva
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
best parent.
Aluka. I mean, I have sympathy because Aluka's definitely a big problem that would be difficult to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I get the reason.
Uh,
He's
I
still a
think they
better
just.
dad than Jing.
I think they just gave up on Miliki because he's just an otaku loser who has no hope.
It's just that no hope. He can he can play video games and do weeby shit. So, that's if that's shooting for the stars for you, kid, you do that.
I mean, he's got 5 kids. He's allowed to have one that's a complete fuck up.
He's like, here's your allowance. Just don't spend it all on porn.
Oh.
If you leave your room and your right arm isn't completely jacked, then I succeeded with you.
You know what? Now that I think about it, for even like a little bit, as I was thinking about the scene where like he lets Killua leave and they do like their blood pack, the blood and thumb thing.
Uh
But now I just remember that before that, they literally had Killua in a fucking torture chamber and were whipping the shit out of him. Never mind, they're fucking horrible parents.
huh. But is
I don't
he
even know
better
why I
than
even
Jing?
postulated that.
But is he better than Jing? That's the question.
I hate to say it, but yeah, he prepares his son for the world around him before just sending him off.
I agree.
Um,
100%. I do agree that he is the better dad, which is sad. I feel like we've kind of exhausted the deadbeat dads. So, I mean, this doesn't have to be briefly, but a few examples of where there just isn't a dad. Um, just plucking a very recent one. We have My Hero Academia, where
yeah,
we
well,
just
that one's extremely straightforward.
mm-hmm, he's not
All
there.
Might is meant to be the surrogate dad, and so his real dad's not in the picture. Deku's real dad is basically a source of paychecks for his mom and him to live a normal lifestyle.
And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the story's concerned.
And he's a character that Deku did not get a quirk from, so that's all. And yeah, I definitely agree with you as far as the surrogate father. It's definitely meant to be All Might. I mean, I could see in the future, because I definitely feel like My Hero Academia is a series that's going to go on for quite a while. I could see his dad circling back and coming into the story.
Oh yeah.
But as it sits right now, he's just a blank space.
Right, and maybe Deku's dad is he's probably okay, a fine guy. And while we're at it, so's probably Jotaro Kujo's. I know you're not familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Not as much as I'd like to be.
But that series is pretty infamous for parental failures, let's say. I mean, you've read Phantom Blood, right?
Yes.
So you remember that, like, George Joestar, the first, was pretty much a dumb piece of shit.
Yes.
Who let Dio Brando into the house and let him burn the dog alive, and to the bitter end trusted Dio.
Yeah.
Like, to not figure out what's going on, he'd have to be pretty dumb. So let's just give him the stupid award and leave it at that.
Okay.
And then, Joseph's dad is just dead. And Jotaro's dad is off being a jazz singer on some cruise ship or something. I can't remember exactly, but he's not in the picture. He's a source for paychecks, and that's it.
Uh-huh.
Josuke's dad is a JoJo from a different part. Giorno's dad is a complicated story. Jolene's dad is Jotaro, and he was bad at it. Part 7 and 8 is just too complicated to get into.
Okay, so yeah, not the best dads. Pretty consistently bad daddery that I hear. And yeah, I did just make up that word, and I think it's pretty cool. I'm just saying. The art of dadding. So yeah.
I mean, even when I think of non-battle shonen series, there's Case Closed. Her dad is just a complete. By her, I mean I can't remember the Japanese name. So Rachel's dad, Richard, is not altogether. He's bad. He's dumb. And then Conan's dad and mom are just not there in the story for the most part. I mean, they're there. They're characters that show up occasionally, but they're meant to be distant figures that represent, when put together, the culmination of what he's trying to be.
Okay.
They understand mysteries at a better level than even he does.
Ooh. And then, well, spinning off of that, another example of, I would argue, a non-shonen series is Assassination Classroom. And that's assuming you subscribe to Nagisa being the main character, as I do. I mean, essentially, it's between Nagisa and Karma after Koro Sensei. But Koro Sensei more or less feels like just a driving force for the series. But we're not as focused on his development as we are with the classroom. He's pretty much just a stagnant character there to push the rest of the cast. But if you look at Nagisa as the main character of the series, we also get a lot of backstory on him, in that we find out, because I know you're not as familiar with the Assassination Classroom series, but a ongoing theme with Nagisa's character is that he is very feminine. We see in flashbacks that we get later in the series, he actually has very long hair that is styled like a traditional girl's hair. And I believe he is voiced by a female in all voicings of the anime. He is voiced by a female, again, to represent his very effeminate features and personality. And we end up finding out nearer to the end of the series that that's because he was raised by a single mother who basically drove his dad away. It's not, we get very little about his dad other than he tried to be there. His mom's a psycho, so he left. He got the fuck out. And so that then reflects on Nagisa in that he basically, his mom tries to turn him into the perfect daughter, ignoring the fact that he is a boy. Like, literally, she puts him on the exact path that she wanted with her life, but was essentially ruined when she became a mother. So, an interesting example of, again, the dad not being there for, I mean, a fairly relatable real-world reason, but how it then impacts the character.
Yeah, and when a series has the parents absent for a more realistic reason like that, uh, then it doesn't really bother me. It's really mostly bothering me when it comes to these battle shonens and fantasy stories, just because it's so consistent. Now, granted, it's very common to make your main protagonist an orphan just to elicit sympathy from the reader. That's extremely common in Western media as well.
Mm-hmm.
I really think it does have something to do with the parent of the same sex is meant to be symbolic of the ideal self, though. Because even I think like Oran Host Club, she does have her dad. What's her name again? The main character of Oran Host Club.
Nope. Nothing. Got nothing on that one. Sorry.
Yeah, you haven't seen it, but
nope.
Basically her dad is in the picture, and he's a good dad. I mean, I don't want to get into the political aspect of this, but he is transsexual, and yeah, I'm just gonna say he is transsexual, so it's not like one could make, I guess, the argument that no, he's not the ideal dad. He's trying to compensate for the fact she no longer has a mom. People have tried to analyze that aspect of the story, but if we just ignore the fact that, he's transsexual, or maybe not transsexual, but
transgender.
He likes to dress like a woman.
So he's a cross-dresser.
Yeah, I think he's just a cross-dresser. He's just as pretty straightforward there for his daughter dad. But again, in that series, your main protagonist is a female, and it's the mother that's absent, just like Maka. The mother is absent. I think it really has something to do with if your main protagonist, it seems like the main protagonists, whatever they might be, they're the parent that shares the same sex as them is always the distant one that's hard to achieve, or they died. They're the one who died, or both died.
One more example like that, and it just because it just came to mind, Yu Yu Hakusho, where we have the single mother raising the main character, and that, I mean, you could argue that is kind of the superpower battle shonen series, but similar to Bleach, it has two separate worlds that don't usually spill into each other. So Yusuke's story is pretty standard as well, in that we know his dad just walked out on his gambling, binge drinking mother, and so she was left to basically ignore Yusuke all his life.
If I remember correctly, in the last volume of the manga specifically, we do get to see his dad, but it's nothing terribly impressive. He's just kind of a guy, and I just remember he smokes, and that's it. I think he might have been like a salary man, or he might have been something a little more shady.
Yeah.
For the life of me, I can't really remember. But
I didn't even remember that happening, so good for you.
He does show up, but it's like, it's just to comment on what his son has done. He's like, oh, he serves ramen, whatever. Like, his dad is not involved in Yusuke's life whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point. He's a deadbeat, basically.
Yeah,
he's not there
a garbage
for
dad. So, yeah. Okay. So with all those examples given and picked apart, why do you think that is? Do you have any particular deep philosophical reason, or maybe even a practical reason as to why that is?
I mean, I've stated why I think it's so tempting, right? The symbolic representation of potential, and then there's the inherent tragedy aspect of, oh, they didn't have both their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And one could make the argument that the type of people that are more likely to engage with fiction likely have broken home lives, right?
Yeah.
So that makes the protagonist more relatable. My why it seems like the reverse is so rare though, when that's not at all reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also just really difficult to tell a story when you have both parents and they're both well to do, and I mean they're going to get in the way of the youth trying to go on adventures and put themselves in unsafe situations.
To,
So
to do that, I feel like you need a more urban setting that's not as quite focused on like a weird, because again, I feel like the big example that we mentioned of a case where the character had both parents was Death Note.
yep.
And it's because the fact that Light is doing what he's doing is actually supposed to be a complete secret, and he's supposed to just live his normal life. So for the majority of the series, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's interesting because it kicks the psychological idea of, oh well, he was screwed up by his parents, so that's why he turned out the way he did. But we get the consistent examples that he has fairly regular, everyday parents that really care about him.
Light, the entire point of Light's character is that he's incredibly blessed. He's incredibly lucky and doesn't know it. He just looks at criminals and those who have done bad with very simple in very simple terms, because he's had such an easy life. He's been blessed with incredible good looks, high intelligence, and no home life issues. Not only that, his parents are incredibly virtuous people, so they have embedded within him good, virtuous ideas. You know?
So you could argue the point that the fact that he has parents like that actually really does play a major role in the story.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. One more example that actually popped into my head, which I know is similar to the Light situation. We have Parasite, where we have Shinichi, who has both of his parents, but it later becomes a driving plot point when he loses his mother.
Yeah, in that series, that represents any chance that he could salvage a normal life has been utterly ruined at that point. That's the hinge of the story, I'd say. That's where the story really turns.
Yeah, it's where he hits the point of no return to pretty much right from the start when he gets Miggy, but it basically shoots any chance of him having a regular life once his mother is just out of the picture. And again, it's actually interesting because it then becomes the case of his father really stepping up to try and be there for his son in as tough of a time as it is. But it also shows the father kind of dealing with his own personal demons that come with this. And so he's not always the best dad, what we see of him, but he tries.
What do we do moving forward? Because I can't ignore this now that I've come to this revelation that there are just no dads.
There are no dads in anime.
Do we just cry?
We just say, I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be a better dad than all these dads. Maybe that's the lesson to pull from this. when you become a dad, or me being a dad, just take those lessons that were instilled in us and be better, be the bigger dad than.
Like, I'm seriously wondering if all these mangaka just did not have good home lives,
Mm-hmm.
or the dads just seem to be tossed away with such fervor. In the case of something like My Hero Academia, you could pretty much tell that story without getting rid of the dad. The only reason the dad is there is so that All Might can symbolically step in as that.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I feel is that I don't know how much of this is Japanese culture versus just our modern culture, but even you look at a lot of popular video games. I mean, I would argue the most iconic example of that is Pokemon. The entire Pokemon series, with one very rare exception that I can think of, there is never a dad. There is always the boy, or sorry, there is always the child wakes up and he's going to go adventure. And so he goes and tells his single mom about it. And she says, okay, well, don't die. And then he's off. But literally the entire Pokemon universe, there's just no dads. There's none. There are men, but there are no dads. And
You know what happened to them?
what?
They all died in the war that Lieutenant Sarge talks about.
You're right. It's the war. I mean, there's valid point to that. Maybe that is what happened. There's just, the point can't be denied. With the exception of like gym leaders, there aren't even that many men in the series in general. None of like super importance unless they're villains, unless they're like gang bosses. But, and I'm sure if I sat here and thought about it, there's a lot of other series that do that kind of thing, but in just a lot of media, there just aren't dads. There aren't enough dads to go around. Why? Why no dad?
Because that's all that can be said. Anime needs more dads and less cads.
Truer words have never been spoken. Well, on that super high note, I hope you liked this discussion of dads and their lack of daddiness. If you like this
I
video,
apologize we didn't really reach some grander point, but it's just an observation.
and it's an interesting observation at that. It's worth noting. They just aren't dads.
I feel like we're going to end up revisiting this in other videos. Like, incidentally, I doubt we do a whole other video about this again, but it's going to come up.
And of course,
now I've thought about it, I'm going to bring it up every time.
Every time it's going to be that's going to be a category in every single series that we review. Are there dads? Then we have to have a 10-minute discussion about the dads in the series. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that interesting discussion. If you liked it, be sure to give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe. Again, we put out weekly content discussing manga and anime, different random issues, news going on in the community, different series. I know we've got some interesting things planned that just keep getting pushed back because life's a bitch. But be sure to stick around. If you have any particular topics that you'd like to see us discuss, again, we predominantly focus on anime, but really any kind of nerdy things we'll talk about. What are your thoughts on dads in anime? Are there any particular ones that really good ones that we missed? Really bad ones that we missed? What's your theory on why there are no dads in anime? Please leave that down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everybody, and someday we'll have a logical closer for these videos, I promise.